Hello and welcome to Chronicle Live's Facebook Live here from Chronicle Towers on what has been a very busy Friday for Newcastle United. We've had Eddie Howe's press conference, we've had another signing, probably the last one of the summer, we'll see before the January window, and we've also had plenty of other news going on around Newcastle United before they face Fulham at Craven Cottage this weekend. So let's start with the news that broke this morning at about 7:30 our time, and that is that Newcastle United have signed 18-year-old teenager Garang Kuol from Central Coast Mariners in Australia. Now, if you haven't heard of this footballer, I'm not surprised. He's made, he's made a lot of headwinds in about 6 months playing down under for Central Coast Mariners. He's only made 7 appearances for the Australian team, and he hasn't actually started a game for the club yet, but he's been really impressing off the bench. He's made 7 appearances, he's scored 4 goals, he's made 1 assist, and that's already caught the eye of Australia's national team, who gave him his first call up to the senior side during the last international break. Came off the bench on Sunday to face Chris Wood's New Zealand, where he did really well again and nearly set up a goal. So Newcastle United have identified him as, a really young talent that they can strengthen their academy prospects with when he joins in January. So the deal looks to be worth around £300,000. He signed a long-term deal with Newcastle, although he won't actually join until January 2023 when the January window opens, and he will stay with Central Coast Mariners until that time. Really exciting young player, one that Eddie Howe spoke about this morning and said that he's the type of player that the club are looking to buy going forward, young, hungry talent for the future. He won't actually be able to play for Newcastle until he sorts a work permit. Given the amount of games he's actually played in Australia, it looks unlikely that he's going to receive one straight away. Newcastle United probably are going to have to loan him out in the January window, just so that he picks up more minutes in Europe. And as a result can pick up that work permit. Let's have a look at what he said this morning then. Speaking after he signed, Kuol said, "It's unreal. As a young boy in Australia, the Premier League is the main thing that everyone watches, but nobody actually thinks they'll reach those heights. To be one of those people, to be in the position I am, it's amazing. Now that I've signed for Newcastle, I want to train hard, playing hard, hopefully go to the World Cup and come back here." Now, this is the big thing with the Winter World Cup coming up in just 2 months' time. Kuol's got a real chance of sort of strengthening those work permit ambitions by getting a few minutes under his belt if he should be picked for the Australian team in the winter. Now, as I say, he did very well off the bench, making his international debut earlier this week, but it remains to be seen whether he'll actually be picked for the senior side for the Qatar World Cup in November, hopefully for Newcastle United. He does. But look, it just goes to show that the club are making a real deliberate attempt to sign the best young talent from not just this country, but around the world. We know that, bringing Kuol in from Australia, they've already brought in, the likes of Charlie MacArthur from Kilmarnock, Alex Murphy from Galway, Jude Smith from Arbroath. A lot of young players that are coming in, being cherry-picked from these teams. And I think in the next couple of months, you can pretty much expect the same is going to happen, but across Europe and especially South America. We know that the club are scouting Brazil quite extensively at this moment in the hope of the find, these young gems that come through, like Richarlison, who, flourish in the Brazilian league before coming to the Premier League and really impressing. So really exciting signing this morning, Kuol. We knew it was in the works for a while, but it's good to see that it's they've got it over the line, especially given how much competition there was for his signature. We know that like Barcelona were very keen on him after he played against them in the summer. Even, Barcelona manager Xavi came out and said that he's a real talent. He didn't believe that at the time he was a 17-year-old. We also know Stuttgart in Germany were quite keen to sign him, given that they also have his older brother Alu on their books in the Bundesliga. So let's move on then. Let's move on to Eddie Howe's press conference. It seems like so long since we've spoken to him, given everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. What with the Queen passing and with this long international break that seemed never ending. But Eddie Howe was back this morning talking to the media. He had a lot of injuries to get through. He had a lot of injuries to talk about. And let's start with Bruno Mars. Went to France over the international break with Brazil to feature in their 2 games against Ghana and Tunisia. Unfortunately, earlier in the week, he picked up a thigh injury and missed both those games. He missed the Ghana game, just spent it on the bench before being sent home after Newcastle asked for him to be recalled before the second week of the international break. Eddie Howe spoke about him this morning. I'll just read you those quotes. He says, Bruno's trained with us. I had a few very difficult calls during the international break to be told various things about various players. We were very concerned for Bruno, but the scan was good, so he's trained and trained well. It's slightly disruptive for him because these 2 weeks were important to get him and his match sharpness back. Now, that's a very, very good point by Eddie Howe. It's not just his thigh problem that Bruno's been dealing with. He also had that hamstring injury before the international break, which kept him out for 3 matches across August and September. It would have been really good to see him get some minutes for Brazil. We know that Tite, the Brazil manager, really likes him. We probably would have seen him play alongside the likes of Neymar and Lucas Paqueta had he been fit. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but it's very, very positive to see that he's came back to Newcastle. They've got the scans done quickly, and they've realised that, he probably looks like he's good to go at Fulham. So really, really important for Newcastle and what's going to be a tough game to have him hopefully starting from the outset. One player that it's not looking as positive for is Alexander Isak. He's another player who went out on international duty with the hope of getting some minutes under his belt for Sweden in their 2 games against Serbia and Slovenia. Unfortunately, he was another who picked up a training injury quite early on at the break. But Sweden actually made the call to send him back a lot earlier, given that the severity of his injury. It looks like it's a thigh problem for Isak as well. This is what Eddie Howe said about him this morning. He said, Isak picked up an injury with Sweden. He's come back and the scan doesn't look too bad, so we're not concerned that it's a long injury, but I think any muscle injury, there's a period you have to be very careful. Isak is running on grass, so he's looking good at the moment. Looks like tomorrow's game in the capital will come too soon for him, but hopefully he could be back for the Brentford game on October the 8th. Who we've got next? We've got Aaron Stokes, who feels like forever since we've seen him in a Newcastle United shirt, since he was scoring that worldie at Wolves. He's been training away from the first team over the international break. He's been away in Monaco working with a personal trainer for some of the break. Looks very good in the videos that he's been putting out on social media, although you never know how much, that's just him trying to focus on his image. But Eddie Howe seemed quite positive on St. Maximin this morning when discussing him. He said, Alan's doing well. He had a period away, but he's came back and he's close, very close. There are a lot of moving parts with us at the moment. So I'm being vague, but I'm being vague because there's a lot of player situations that aren't quite clear. I'll know more after today. The expectation was Alan St. Maximin was going to train with the first team today before Howe makes a last-minute decision on him and a couple of other players before they head down to Fulham tomorrow. Really, really important that they get Maxi back. Hopefully he hasn't been rushed back, and if he's fit to play, we don't want to see a recurrence of that injury that we've seen over the last couple of weeks with him, because he's been a huge, huge miss. We've seen it against Palace, we've seen it against Bournemouth, the lack of creativity when he's not in the side alongside Bruno. It's really hampered Isak, I think, since he arrived, and it's also, the team have really struggled in front of goal, and I think that's a huge part of his game this season. He's really seemed to have improved on his final ball and his sort of ability in front of goal. So hopefully we see Maxi back tomorrow. Chris Wood is another one who picked up an injury on international break. It must have been torture for Eddie Howe this week. Every time the phone rang, it was another doctor telling him that he's got another player injured. But Chris Wood suffered a rib injury playing against Garang Kuol in Australia on Sunday. He only managed 33 minutes before he came off, saying that he was struggling to breathe. A late assessment will also be made on him to see if he can play on Saturday. Callum Wilson, let's just talk about him. Finally, the one other player who's been missing in recent weeks. Desperate to see him back in a Newcastle shirt. Hopefully see him alongside Isak in the next couple of weeks. Eddie Howe said about him, Callum has trained. He trained for around 10 days with us and is in a good place. Every time he comes back from injury, he does the work and doesn't cut corners. He's put in a lot of work with sports scientists and he's looked good. I mean, this is just Callum Wilson to a T, isn't it? He's really, really been determined to sort of put these injury nightmares behind him, although, it hasn't seemed to work. every couple of weeks he seems to be, struggling with another hamstring injury. But hopefully, he is, ready for a good spell of games. Eddie Howe pretty much confirming that he will be back tomorrow, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him thrown in from the outset. Hopefully, we only give him sort of an hour or so, wrap him in cotton wool, before, quite a pretty hectic October. I'm just going to go to one of the comments here in the comment section from L Stapleton. He's saying, how many points towards his visa will he get per match in the World Cup? I'm not actually sure how much an international game gets you these days. I know that the rules have slightly changed since Brexit comes in. But given the fact that he's only played 145 minutes for Central Coast Mariners, plus one substitute appearance for Australia, given that Australia's first division isn't even in those top 5 bands in terms of how the work permits are sorted, you'd expect that he's going to need quite a lot of loan time or minutes elsewhere before he can actually earn enough points on that system to earn a work permit. We know that he needs 15 points on that permit before he can play in England. So hopefully, as I said, he gets the call up to the World Cup and it speeds up that process of him getting minutes. Now, one last thing to talk about before we go, and that is Eddie Howe and England. Now, I know we've all had enough of England in the last couple of weeks and we just want to focus on club football, but the rumours have been swirling that if Gareth Southgate leads the national side, Eddie Howe is the man to replace him. Now, after Graham Potter went to Chelsea a couple of weeks ago, Eddie Howe is now the clear favourite to take the England job. He was asked about that this morning, and his response was, Gareth Southgate has done an incredible job. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'd never say never, but it's not currently on my radar. It's all Newcastle and investing on trying to make this team the best I can. Now, pretty much the answer we expected from Eddie Howe. We knew that he wasn't probably going to confirm or deny anything at this stage, but it does feel like his answer is probably where we're at the minute. I feel like Eddie Howe's less than a year into this journey with Newcastle. He's got, a lot of work left to do. I think he's got, real big plans to take this football club to the next level. And, even though it's a very, very tricky job to turn down, I don't think at this minute England is the job for him. I don't think it's a job that suits him. I think he likes being out on the training pitch 5-6 days a week. I don't think, 2 games every 2 months is going to suit him at the age of, in the mid-40s. I think maybe later in life, if he continues to impress at different jobs in England, then, I don't see any reason why the FA wouldn't give him the job. But I think at this stage in time, and I think a lot of Newcastle fans will hopefully want this as well. But I think if that job comes up in the next couple of months, I can't see Eddie Howe jumping ship to take it. I'm obviously open to people telling me I'm wrong in the comments and telling me that it's too big of a job to turn down. But I personally think that, he wants to see it out at Newcastle. He's just signed a brand new long-term deal. And I think he'll want to be at this club for many, many years to come. But look, saying that, England, struggling at the minute. They did very well to come back and draw with Germany. I think, had they not scored those 3 late goals on Tuesday or Monday, whenever they played, I think we'd really be sat here, debating whether Southgate leads this team at the World Cup. Now, it looks like Southgate is going to take this Three Lions team into Qatar in November, but it's going to be a tricky tournament out there with that heat and the other nations that are impressing and going into this tournament with a bit of form, like the likes of Argentina, Brazil, and France. You could quite easily see this job being available in January if England suffer, an early exit, or if Southgate decides that he's taking the team as far as he can. So I'm sure that this is going to rumble on for a good few months, but I personally can't see Eddie Howe taking the England job at the moment. Lee Ryder's going to have a big sort of comment piece up on the site at 4 o'clock, so do give that a read for a bit more on Eddie Howe and how that England sort of rumour could work out. But thanks very much for joining us this afternoon, and let's keep our fingers crossed that Newcastle United get back to winning ways on Saturday. We'll have another podcast for you after the game, and we also have myself and Andrew Musgrove with our usual Monday chat reviewing the game. So we'll speak to you then, and we hope that you all have a good weekend.